Welcome to What the Flick. We're all here. We won't all be speaking. Alonzo, Ben, Matt, and Christy. This film is called The Rider.
Not the Rider.
Not the Writer. And Christy will tell us about it.
I will. It's about somebody who rides, the rider, or he did ride. Brady Jandreau stars as a former rodeo cowboy who, at the film's start, has suffered a really, really horrific accident, and he can no longer actually ride, but he can still train horses, and he's trying to figure out how to forge a new life for himself. Given that, being on a horse is all he's ever known his entire life, and now he's got to figure out who he is on his South Dakota Indian reservation, where he is a bit of a superstar and trying to find a new identity for himself. Take a look.
No more riding, no more rodeos. If you don't stop, your seizures are gonna get worse.
Sometimes dreams aren't meant to be.
Who's this?
That's Apollo.
I believe God gives each of us a purpose. For the horse, it's to run across the prairie.
Go, man,
For a cowboy, it's to ride.
This is the second film from Chloe Zhao, writer-director Chloe Zhao, who found all these people who are essentially playing versions of themselves while she's making her first film.
Right.
Songs My Brothers
Taught Me. She's living on a reservation.
Yeah.
And then when she met Brady and sort of found out his backstory as somebody who had been a rodeo rider and a horse trainer, but then had this horrible accident where his skull got stomped and he couldn't do it anymore. And so she makes a movie that is essentially about him. He plays a version of himself. His real sister and real father play versions of themselves. There's a lot that I think is really, compellingly told here. She, really gives you a look at the kind of day-to-day life of characters like this. And it does sort of address the idea of, all right, my whole life was going to be about this one thing, and now I can't do this one thing anymore, so what does that leave me? And, there's another guy in the film who is also presented as he is, who is a champion rider who is now severely debilitated, lives in a rehab facility.
His name is Lane Scott.
Lane Scott,
and
thank
he'd
you,
been in a car accident that, in real life, that has all but made him paraplegic.
Yes.
And they were friends, and they had known each other. And you get to see film of a young Lane as a writer, very, very vigorous and very healthy. And then you see how he's kind of wasted away, and that you kind of get to see Brady look at Lane and alternate between being supportive of Lane and still being able to wrestle with like the fear of he could end up there versus what he's still able to do compared to Lane. I really like this movie. I thought this movie was it grabbed me a lot more than I expected it to.
It's languid. It takes its time, right? When I watched it a while ago, and it takes its time to grab you. Because at first it's like, okay, where are we going with this? Because it's very, very languid, and it's very deliberately paced, and it gets compared to Terrence Malick a lot, and I think justifiably so, because it is so beautiful, and it is slow, and it is very immersive and evocative of this very rich sense of place.
I was going to say, it's very much about people and their relationship to the landscape, to where they are, to how they live. Yeah. My only beef with the film is that, I think there's something weird about seeing a film that is made on a reservation, that is about the sort of limited choices of the people who live there, that has no interest at all in exploring the larger sort of political context that they live in.
That's not what it's trying to do, though. It's a different kind of movie.
I understand that, but it just seems to me like to pretend that none of that stuff matters, that the reason that they have limited choices is because of these other complicating factors that the movie isn't interested in, to me just sort of feels like, oh, it's so sad he can't ride horses anymore. It's like, well, yeah, that is sad, but there's more to it than that. It seems to me, it feels a little reductive somehow to pretend that all other things being equal, he just has this one thing that's being taken away from him. It's like all other things aren't equal, and that directly impacts these people in their lives.
But I would say she's trying to tell a more intimate, personal story than that, and she's trying to focus on this wonderful it's awful word to say, a sad story, a compelling story that she has found, and I don't know that she's trying to get her arms around the larger context here.
I'm not saying that it has to be like this sort of
I'm not
Jeremiah.
sure every story needs to tell that kind of story, though.
Of course, but to pretend that that's not part of that story, and that this guy's story exists independently of all those other things, to me feels like there's a chunk missing somehow.
I think she's trying to focus more on the individual spirituality of his journey, which sounds super corny as the words leave my mouth, but that is what. But there's a great spirituality to the land and the skies and the sunsets and
Absolutely.
the vistas and
totally
the epiphanies
agree.
that he achieves on his own, which are hard fought and won. And that's just, I think she's not trying to get her arms around a giant story about what's happened to a people. This is a story about a person, what's happened to a person, I would say.
Right. We reviewed Where is Kira, and I think there's a similar thing that doesn't get addressed in Where is Kira, in that the character Michelle Pfeiffer plays has trouble paying the bills and for housing without it really getting into the skyrocketing costs of housing and how hard it is for a woman of her age to try and find a job that can support herself. And that's not exactly what that movie is about. And I don't think that's what this one's about. I hear where you're coming from, but what grabbed me, and I think what saves the movie from, and doesn't need to be about that, is you get these great scenes where Brady is training horses. He's taking horses that no one's been able to ride, and it's clearly cut down from these, and this is what he does. This is how
in real life.
Yeah, he's a genuine horse whisperer.
Right. And this is how Zhao met him, because he was training her and training horses. And you see, this is a guy who's got a gift, and he's got a talent, and it's a thing that he loves. It dovetails in what you talk about, like when somebody who's good at their job does their job well. You get to see that in this. And this is that.
No, and I love those.
I'm into it now.
When he's training those horses, and the challenge, and this is the thing that's kind of devastating, is you see that even his ability to do that is in doubt, because that's more so than being the rodeo cowboy that makes money, that makes a lot of money. He could probably eke out a living just training horses, but he
has to get on the horse.
But he has to be able to get literally. He's got to get back on the horse. But what's
and even like when the horse's head kind of bucks, there's a moment like where you think you don't know how that's going to go.
And what's to me, like, the emotional weight of this, the emotional devastation of this movie, is that the thing he was doing, which was kind of the pursuit of the bigger paycheck and the bigger kind of flashier
the glory
the
rodeo
of rodeo glory has now jeopardized his ability to do the thing that he, again, sounding cheesy, like he was kind of born to do.
Sure.
And he gets such joy out of him. That's one of the things that this movie does really well, is you see, and it's very subtle. Like, we're talking about this, and it sounds really cheesy, and it's not. And that's what's really amazing, is he's training these horses, and you see him riding, and the movie very quietly, very subtly kind of celebrates that. And there's these great, like, language shots of him just riding the horse around. And it's beautiful. And there's not swelling music under it.
No.
It's just like,
absolutely.
And the scenes with him and his sister, who's his real life sister, who has Asperger's, like, those aren't heavy-handed. Those are quite lovely, and that fleshes out who he is and the dynamic of his family. His dad plays his dad, and he's tough on him, and you can see how he navigates the sister and the dad in different ways.
So are these all non-professional actors?
Yeah, they're all actual people playing versions of themselves with their actual names.
Right, and one of the great things you see about Brady is that there's times you see him get upset, and you see him, there's that scene where he's wrestling with one of his buddies, but then at other times, like with his sister, with his friend, he's capable of this. Or you see how gentle he can be. Yeah. And I just found this a really fascinating movie. And it's, it's about people that other filmmakers will, like, kind of look down at and
ignore
entirely. And it's easy to write off somebody like this. This is a fascinating movie. I really, really, really like it.
What's your number?
I think that I have to put my number up now because I was going too low on this, and I'm going to go 8.
Okay, I'm saying 8.
I said 7. Okay. I mean, it's beautifully made. There's a lot that I like about it, but I for me, there's just this inescapable feeling of like there's an elephant in the room we're not talking about that is impacting everybody's lives here, and to pretend that it's not there it diminishes the story for me.
So we just changed our numbers. So
That's at
7.7.
7.7.
All right, and it's at 98%. Chloe Zhao, you are pretty impressive, and keep making movies because this is a really, really exciting.
She won the first annual Bonnie Award at the Spirit Awards
One
this
Day
year.
at a
Yeah.
Time Festival. Sorry.
Yeah, she was. No, and The Rider was nominated for Best Feature, Best Director, Best Cinematography. It's a beautiful film. If you can see it on a big screen,
Yeah.
please do because the skies are just gorgeous. So our number is 7.7.
7.
It's a 98%. Please go find it if you can. Bye.